your notice indicates that the developer has submitted a formal application for what you describe as planning permits. And when you initially made your presentation, unless I misunderstood, I think I heard you say that all that was before the city at this point was the environmental impact report. Ordinarily, and perhaps I'm mistaken, but ordinarily you've got to have a project that's being considered before you have an EIR to analyze it. And I think it would be helpful for us all to know what it is that's actually been filed with the city.
Sure. The only thing that we currently have an application in for is the EIR. If you notice in the notice of preparation and in the initial study, it does have a project description. That is essentially the project that is being looked at as part of the EIR. The formal submission for the entitlements will be forthcoming. So that will not change. That project we're looking at is the project that will be looked at as part of the EIR.
And then you did a CDIP survey, and we told you in the CDIP survey we wanted to keep things the way they were. We didn't want heights raised. We didn't want density increased. And traffic will never be fixed. Why do we keep getting projects that are so massive like this one is? Let's have something 35 feet.
I think there's a couple answers to that. With regards to the projects coming forward, property owners have the right to ask. They can ask to go through the process. And as a city, we lead the process there. And I would defer the second answer, which is more of an economic answer as to why it needs to be the height it is for us to put the square footage it is.
When we all sit here and talk about traffic mitigation, the biggest single traffic mitigation measure that could be made has been blocked by Peter Douglas and the Coastal Commission. And that was, we originally had a loop that aligned Studebaker Road in a big loop that came around behind the marketplace and dumped off into Pacific Coast Highway. Now the Coastal Commission says it can't go through this wetlands area, and it's going to loop it just around behind Shopkeeper Road, and nobody is going to come from the freeways down Studebaker, make a left-hand turn and then another left-hand turn, and it completely washes out all the benefit that could be made. So as the EIR people and the traffic mitigators work on this, the biggest single thing they could do would be to somehow talk Coastal Commission into revitalizing that issue of aligning Studebaker Road so that it would take all the pressure off of the Have you ever noticed how in these forums it's only the people that are anti that interrupt people and
we're sorry about that.
But in any case, that's the biggest single traffic mitigation that could be made. I would impel the city to try and revive that. I've been on the East Coast. I've seen raised roadways go through wetlands areas beautifully that don't impact any wetlands or sensitive areas. It could be done here.
Development agreements are themselves are considered projects under CEQA, and when Mr. Beck was talking about development agreements perhaps maybe having off-site aspects to it, like up to the 22 freeway, well, that needs to be looked at in the EIR, and he very clearly said that the development agreement isn't really going to come to closure until the very end of the cycle. So my question is, how can an EIR be adequate and actually address the project and the appropriate impacts if they aren't going to be looking at a development agreement until the process is completed?
What do you think?
It was a very interesting meeting. And it always strikes me whenever I come to these meetings and I see these developments, if the city staff and if DeLong and Foster had not been endorsing this, they wouldn't have submitted something this grand. Now, if they can truly mitigate the traffic, I think is in question, but I'll be meeting with the developers next week and looking through their project, and we'll see. we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting process.
Sadly, I've heard that the density is far too great here. I believe that the prior Lennar proposal, which was 4 stories over commercial use, in fact was too dense as well. I can recall filing a coastal appeal and having the lead agency and the developer at the time say that they would be pleased to get half that density. How they can now come back a few years later and propose to add 3 or 4 times the density is hard to understand. I suspect that this will be vigorously opposed at the NOP level. It'll be opposed at the draft. It'll be opposed before the Coastal Commission, and that this will not be an easy sell.
There's people who have concerns, which are totally understandable at this point in time, but that's why we do an EIR, because we want to do a thorough analysis to make sure that the issues that people are concerned about are studied, and that the kind of mitigation measures that are put forward are real, and they're doable, and they're going to achieve the goals. So I thought all those good questions and good comments, it just reflects that people care a lot about this site.
What did you come away with as the big issue?
I think traffic's probably the issue that most people are concerned about. And it's completely understandable. People who live in this district are impacted on the traffic on a day-to-day basis. So we took it seriously, so much so that we had our own traffic consultant analyze traffic prior to the time that we even submitted to the city. Because we felt that unless we could responsibly stand up and say that we could mitigate most, perhaps all, but certainly most of the traffic, that we probably weren't going to get community support. And we do think that that's achievable. The fact that there hasn't been much development in this part of town means that there hasn't been dollars to do some of the mitigations that are there to be done. And one of the good things that results from development is that there are dollars available to do mitigation that will dramatically improve traffic, both peak and off-peak.
That would improve traffic from what it is now?
Well, a lot of the traffic is background traffic. You have to remember that background traffic is going to grow regardless of what we do. So the increment that we create is relatively small compared to that background. So what we have to focus on is trying to put mitigation dollars in those places where you can get the most impact, particularly in peak periods. Because even second in PCH, most of the time functions just fine. Where people have a problem is occasionally during the AM or the PM of the Saturday. A lot of the other intersections around the project are actually, based on our analysis, are going to be improved after we put mitigations in place. So we feel pretty comfortable that when all of this analysis is done, that we'll come up with a realistic list of mitigations that will give people a sense of comfort that, yes, there's going to be some traffic impacts, but on balance, the benefits that the project brings, including revenues, including jobs, and including the beautiful gateway, are more than enough to offset some of the traffic impacts.